Welcome back to Still Uncaptured with me, Kgomotso Matsunyane.
And myself, Ndumiso Ngcobo, Mapoloba.
Yes. I feel like
I want to go on so badly. It's all right.
So, my friend, are you good?
I'm very good. Yourself?
Ooh, something's been keeping me up at night.
What?
Something's been keeping me up at night. You heard recently that let's talk about Stillefontein. Yeah, Stillefontein among many mines.
Do we have to?
Yes, we do.
Of course we have. We have to, yeah.
78 bodies were brought up from the mine, right? If you've been living under a rock or you don't live in South Africa, Stillefontein is a disused mine where hundreds of illegal miners had been occupying and apparently been at an impasse and not wanting to come out for months now.
You know, I know you well enough to know that when you say illegal, I have to ask, why illegal? But does this
Good
not
question.
go to the core of exactly where we are?
You know, this
right?
country is built on mining.
Yes, of course.
The reason we were defeated and our land was taken away from us was because of the minerals, the rich, vast minerals that we have under our country, right? And it seems weird to me that the only people who have access to this are still white for the vast majority of it, essentially, right?
Please do not qualify that.
Okay.
The owners of the mines are white.
Okay.
Period. Right?
Period.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Continue.
And then they've allowed political elites to own part of those mines, which explains a lot of kind of like what is happening right now. So I also used to call them illegal miners or zamazamas until I was on a panel once and somebody called them artisanal miners. And I thought, I kind of like that, you know, because there's a certain equality, I suppose, that it says whoever can should be able to mine the wealth of the country. That the vast majority of them are not South African is a problem. Yeah, but we're talking about people who used to be employed in these mines when they were functioning and now taking advantage. So there's a few things that occurred to me. First of all, there was a stench. It's funny smell. A stench of marikana that was in the air, where 39 people were killed within a few minutes. And then I thought, how expandable are black bodies, particularly black men, that you can have 78 being pulled up from under the ground in one day. These are faceless, nameless, extremely poverty-stricken black African men.
Right.
And so the world does not give a fuck.
Yeah.
The world really doesn't care for impoverished people in general, but for African people in particular.
A bit of a step back, right? I was liking where you were going with this, right? About just the historical part of it. I mean, we're not going to go into the
minutiae.
The minute. Yeah, we're not, you know. So the fact that historically people came, grabbed land, grabbed mines, grabbed all of this, right? And we know all the companies, right, that are involved. And so we are now here, and people are, and we call it, you say, you know, white. Then a couple of elites come in who don't really own so much mines, but bits and pieces of
political
shares,
elites, can we say?
Political elites, right? So they go in and so on. How do we get to this? A very important question. Before we talk about the 78 bodies, which is a very important question, how do we get to this?
First of all, unless somebody is buying this gold from these illegal miners, it wouldn't be worth it.
Because also, it's very important to say this, right? There is still plenty of mineral wealth, even in these mines where mining has discontinued.
Yeah.
And the point there being, it has become, on a large scale, for the type of super profits that they used to, it has become economically not viable to continue digging. But for you and I, if I could go in there and try and make my wealth from there, I could be exceedingly rich by my black standards, right? Right. So that's important, right? So very important question you're asking. So who is benefiting? Ultimately, who is benefiting?
Who's buying the gold?
Who's buying the gold, right? Yeah.
Because we're not
Yeah.
in charge of its manufacturing,
Yeah.
it's smelting, and it's selling over to wherever it's being sold to, right? In the sense that we are not in charge of the gold economy as African people.
We are relatively smart people, you and I, right?
Relatively.
Relatively. So I do not know if I had to come across gold. Where would I, like, who do you go to?
Oqala kae?
It's a very specific, very technical field, which begs the question again, who is buying the gold?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But also, if you are...
And what color are they?
Yeah.
Now I want to know.
But also it begs the question for me, which is a very interesting question, which is when we talk about these illegal miners are foreigners and they're taking our gold, how much gold do you have? So, like, really, whose gold is this? When even if because in this country, could I walk around in my garden and I discover that there's gold? Can I keep that gold?
Nope.
So
Nope.
when we are railing against these illegal miners,
These foreigners,
yeah, which culminates in this, looping back to the 78 bodies, these expandable black bodies that we are not interested in, right? Where's our thinking? What
I don't
motivates
know,
us?
but
Yeah?
I'll tell you where I think the Minister of Petroleum and Minerals
Yes,
is sympathetic towards.
yes.
I got worried. Well, first of all, he finally went there a week ago to the mine where he should have gone, like right in the beginning. Okay, but he said something which was very much along the concomitant letter, which preceded what? Marikana.
Yes.
Remember the letter
Yes.
that Cyril Ramaphosa wrote talking about this is no longer a labor issue, but a criminal issue. Ugwede said, Gwizi, he said something kind of similar
Yeah.
last week when he came in. But he was more concerned about the criminal element, where he's not talking about the supply chain of these minerals and who the ultimate benefactors are, because you wouldn't have hundreds. I was shocked that it was hundreds. I thought it was tens.
Yes.
And it is hundreds of people down there.
Yes.
They wouldn't risk their lives. Can you imagine what it's like down there, living with smelly corpses, carcasses of people rotting, being abused? Oh, and of course, like, it so worried me when they started bringing up 13 and 14-year-olds, which means there's a human trafficking element, which is also attached to this.
Part of this, part of the problem here that we have is, this is how you end up with podcasters sitting and asking these particular questions. It's a conversation for another day, because investigative journalism, if there was a newsroom where, and I work for a newspaper, the Sunday Times, right? So if there is a question that needs to be asked, it is follow the money, follow where, how. I do not know. I mean, have you ever read anything about the mine?
No.
The gold comes out of here, it gets given to this person, it gets given to that person, and where ultimately does it end up?
No, but it tells you a lot that one of the kingpins, called not Cobra, Tiger, disappeared into thin air.
Speaking of greasy, yeah. Tiger, yes.
Disappeared into thin air.
Yes.
And you know that he did not do it on his own.
Yeah.
Somebody in the police service had something directly to do with this. But you asked an interesting question, and I know people will be like, oh, Kgomotso, what are you talking about? Artisanal mining.
Yeah.
These are criminals.
Yes.
I agree with you to an extent, to the extent that we're talking about these guys who were terrorizing the communities around which they were. You raised a very interesting point, and I wonder if you can expand on it, about the conversation about human rights becomes a little problematic.
Yeah.
Because you're ignoring the human rights of those communities who were incredibly adversely affected by these miners.
Yeah. And it's part of this tragedy, is that when there is more than one victim, but seemingly these victims themselves are at loggerheads with each other, because those communities do not want those artisanal miners, right?
Without a doubt.
They don't.
With good reason.
Yeah, with very good reason. They're supposed to not. So when people talk about the human rights of the illegal miners, it's very important that we also talk about the human rights of those particular communities.
Without a doubt. But
Yeah.
here's the thing that I would about talking about the expendability of
Yeah.
black bodies is that for those that were lucky to come
Mm.
out alive
Alive.
and they're going home
Yes.
to whatever communities they come from, whether it's Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa,
Mm.
all of them. And I'm wondering, these are husbands,
Yeah.
these are brothers,
Yeah.
these are sons.
These are
And I wonder what kind of trauma they come up with from having this particular experience. How do you treat your wife when maybe you were somebody's wife emkotini?
yeah, in the
Yes, and it kind of explains sort of like this generational trauma that we have as African people is going to take a while to get rid of.
but there's also there's also another conversation that needs to be had. But just to add to your point about the expendability of black bodies, black men that went into these mines, is I wonder if it has ever occurred to anyone to just ask this question: what would be the body count? There must be records somewhere. What is the body count since the mining started in this country? How many bodies are down there that we don't even know about?
Right.
How many? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands? Is it tens of thousands? How many
we
people
have no
are down
idea. I bet you we don't have it. These are
But
people that are not
isn't
counted
this-
at the borders.
But isn't this the problem, though, that we don't even care?
Right.
The 10,000, 20,000, I don't know what the number is, but there have been so many bodies that have
Right.
been swallowed by the earth.
People who will never get to see their children again.
Yes.
And the thing about mining that we hardly ever talk about anymore is how much, how 65% of black households in South Africa are led by women. And I wonder, Hore, like the trauma of having somebody go, the head of the household, so to speak, go be away for 11 months out of the year and only come home once a year. What that generational destruction caused by what? Mining because they needed black bodies to go dig umkoti. And who decides? We were worried there, Marikana was saying 12,500 rand. Where do they get that figure from?
Yes.
Do you know how much the CEO of a mining company earns?
I don't want to know.
Do you know what kind of watches they wear?
Yeah.
And how much those cost? And how many families they would feed? The promises that were made at Marikana that are still to date in 2025 have yet to be fulfilled. It's a huge injustice. I don't know. Mining is a problem. Anyway, is all that we're saying is that mining is a problem. What else did you want to talk about? I suggest that we take just 1 minute to think about this. And then when we come back, I want us to talk about one of the other big scourges in our country, guns and gun violence.
So listen, before we went away, right? You know when you get touched on your studio, you're wanting to talk about guns, the culture of guns.
Yeah, first of all, there's too many guns in this country, man. That's crazy.
You know, one thing about my life right now is that I kind of am straddling Gauteng and KZN.
Right.
So last year, 2024, I was actually counting. I actually spent 23 weeks of the year in
KwaZulu Natal.
in KZN. I've got a frail 80-year-old mother. I've got to be very present. So it's one of those things we've had to discuss and so on. So first of all, just as a general rule, I don't like guns, and me
too.
But it's for me. It's even worse than that. I fear guns, right? And
where does it come from, by the way?
I grew up in Mpumalanga Township, possibly the worst killing field in the Kwa Zulu Natal violence of the 1980s and 1990s. More people died in that tiny little island of a township in the middle of nowhere between Durban and Pietermaritzburg. Thousands of people died in such a small community, right? So, I mean, we used to sleep on the floor because, you have to sleep, in the passage, because if you sleep in the bedroom, someone might throw something through the window and so on. So I can tell you from the sound, oh, that's an AK-47. Oh, that's an R5. Oh, so I grew up with so much guns in use. So my first experience with guns is with guns in use and people bodies, where, as a young child, you're walking to church and you're walking through some path and there's a dead body. I mean, the first time I saw
Wow.
someone dead. So I fear guns, right? So anywhere in the country when I see people with guns, it's so bad that when I come to a particular shopping center and I see those cash in transit
Right.
vehicles,
You walk away.
changing money, but I don't want to be caught in a crossfire. I fear
Right,
guns.
right.
I really. But then I go to KZN. KZN is a different country, man, when it comes to guns. Guns are now becoming a culture. Like brandishing of weapons. Everyone's got a gun. Everyone. Now, even traditional ceremonies, there's shooting of guns instead of ululating with women and so on. And it is bothering me a lot, this thing. I don't know how you feel. Why do you fear guns?
Part of it is that culture of, the 80s.
Yes.
When our glorious movement wanted
Yes.
to make the country ungovernable.
Yeah.
This is kind of where some of this started. Like, let's be quite clear and honest. A lot of guns were brought in because,
Yes.
well, let's just put it like it is. We were preparing for war.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And some
yeah.
places like Mpumalanga Township in KZN
Yes.
were at war.
was
Literally,
war,
like a
yeah.
soft civil war of sorts, Guns, I've never liked them. I
Mm.
would never date somebody with a gun. You read too many times of guns being used against women,
Yes.
particularly by intimate partners.
Yes.
And so it seems, and it's like a coward's weapon, a gun.
Yes, yeah.
With a knife, you gotta like put your back into it a little bit.
Yeah.
With a gun, it's something that you can do from far.
Yeah.
And you don't have to take accountability. And because it's like what? Because people don't.
Oh, yeah, guns don't kill people. People kill people. Yeah,
You know that nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I just don't like.
Yeah.
Because it's I think the use of guns is mostly negative,
Yeah.
more than positive. And I absolutely loathe and despise the people who manufacture arms, because they're some of the most evil people in the world. So every time you hear of a school shooting, for example, or you'd be like, really, America, you're gonna have like an automatic weapon as like something that people can buy for themselves in the house? Like, that's crazy.
I mean, I'll shock you. I may have told you this in the past. We've been friends for a very long time. But I owned a gun once.
You did?
I did. And I can tell you that there was no license involved. It was just one of those things.
Where the hell did you buy it?
Katlehong, Kumalo Street. So because I remember that
Wow.
I deluded myself into thinking that I'll be safer if I have a gun in my first year of living in Gauteng, which was 1994. But also, I mean, I think also it came from just that culture, because I hadn't reflected enough about the fact that guns are really, really, are things that I just find abhorrent and so on. So I owned this gun for about 2 years, and then I got rid of it. Do you know why?
Why?
If I had a gun, if I continued owning guns up until now, I guarantee you that I would have used it at some point. At some point, you're going to use it.
I think they give people a false sense of security.
Of security.
Sure, at
Yes,
this instance,
yeah.
people will be like, I protected myself. Or, it is
Yes,
possible. But remember that incident in Braamfontein? For me, it's just too many people
You're
with
talking about
testosterone.
which incident? Remember?
Oh,
Just remind.
there's always
yeah.
several. Sorry. Where there
Yeah.
were two young men who one killed the other.
Coming from a club.
Coming from a club.
And I think one of them, if not both of them, were actually both in the security cluster.
Indeed.
I think one was a metro,
police and one was metro.
Metro. And
Yes.
this guy is like, purely because he's got a gun.
One started beating the other up.
Yes.
And threatened this guy with a gun.
Yeah.
And the other one didn't ask. He just took out his gun. 4-5 bullets later, he's gone. And these are people who are friends.
Yes.
With friends like these, who needs enemies?
Yeah. And that's a very important thing, because we were talking about, for instance, the use of guns with intimate partners, but there's also a whole lot of it which is between friends.
Right.
friends sitting drinking, and guns and alcohol
and guns
and
are a deadly
guns.
combination.
You know what's an interesting
What?
stat is that during the lockdown there is a New Year's Eve where at Baragwana I don't think they got one patient coming in for trauma. I think we were going into 2021.
Oh,
Shortage of alcohol. People
Right.
are all at home and
Right.
so on. Otherwise, no one, doctors at Bara will tell you, no one wants that shift because you'll just be suturing the whole night.
Right.
If they haven't hacked each other with pangas,
Right.
they have stabbed each other, but also mostly guns.
Mm.
Guns. Like,
Do you have a solution to the gun issue in South Africa? Because every year there's a call for amnesty, right? To say
Yes.
no questions asked.
Yeah.
Bring us your gun. Whether you got it legally or illegally, we don't care. We just want to get rid of them. But here's the problem.
Yes.
Our wonderful police service. There's always somebody. Those same guns are going to be sold in Mitchell's Plain, in Westbury.
Yeah.
By who? By the people who collected them.
Yeah.
So what's the fun?
So you asked me a question, and I'm going to always stress this. This show is not just about, it's not about providing answers. It's about asking the important questions, because we also do want this show to be interactive.
Yes.
We also want to hear from people.
Please talk to us.
Because
Please talk to us. We'll have the details on the screen.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that I really do not have the answer, but I know that where it comes from is it comes from a particular culture.
Yeah, but that cultures, the beauty of cultures is that they can change. I always quote England and Japan because their police services don't even carry guns.
Can you imagine a Barbie being put in the middle of Westbury and the gangs are coming? We'll shoot
or I'll chase you.
We'll shoot the whistle out of your mouth. We laugh, but
no, because it's funny. But what's not funny and what's really amazing is that those countries have incredibly low incidence of gun violence. So the best solution to having guns is not to have guns.
Yeah,
that's quite frankly
and it's about. But it's sad when those in power who have the power to actually change all of these things are the ones surrounded by the most guns. Because they've got bodyguards. In KZN in particular, every councillor and MEC and anything who is in politics has got 3 men in KZN with assault rifles just walking into Christian shopping center in Hillcrest. There is a man you've never seen this man before, but he's a politician and he's surrounded by guns.
Why do so many people need protecting? But anyway, that's for another day. We'll be back right after this.
So all right. So let's change tact, right?
Yes.
We live here in the Republic of South Africa, and my question to you is: who is in charge in this country?
The GNU, obviously, Government of National Unity.
Why do you say government?
Is there even such a thing? We're talking about an alliance between the ANC and the DA.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Because, let's just talk about it a little bit, right? So the ANC gets what? Less than 40. I don't know why I love to just say. I mean, everyone runs it
you
up
like
to
repeating
40.
that.
Less than 40. So it was about 39%, right? And so they have to look around. And the only options really at this moment is the DA, it's the EFF, it is the new kid on the block.
MK.
The new old kid on the block, MK, right? And the ANC made a tactical or strategic, I do not know what it is. I think it's probably more tactical than strategic. I do not know. This is very important to tell nowadays with the ANC. They go with the DA. So they now have to just find a couple of other people, just, create this illusion of a GNU.
But the ANC has a bigger problem than the DA.
Yes.
right now?
What is that problem?
The ANC. The party is
Yeah.
imploding.
And here's the thing. People who are within the ANC, who truly love the ANC, the people that really fought for this country, most of them, the guys that think technically and so on, would actually agree with you. And so you're not, it's not as controversial as you might think.
No, as if
So many
KZN,
people,
Joburg, not Joburg, Gauteng,
yeah.
those two provinces are in limbo. There's going to be what?
Yes.
Reconstruction or restructuring?
Reconfiguration.
Reconfiguration. It's in crisis.
Yeah. So I don't know. What are your feelings about the okay, you want to call it the NCDA coalition? How do you feel? Do you feel that your interests are being served, and are going to be served? Because it's a different conversation to be like, yeah, these guys are trying to pull a fast one over us. But also another question is it working? Do you from what you read, from what you see, is more importantly, because the next question is, if you say yes, I was going to say to you, for whom? Because I think for the ANC and the DA, I think that the GNU is working.
For them, absolutely.
I think
But
it's
I was
working,
going
yeah.
to say, these are also two parties,
Yeah.
neither of which I have any confidence in.
Yeah.
So it's a band of thieves in jail
Yeah.
that are just going to run away with my rights. I don't
Yeah.
particularly have any strong feel. I didn't vote for any of them.
Yeah.
And have no intention of voting for either of them.
Yes.
So it's not particularly two parties that I trust. And maybe it's two parties that kind of deserve each other. So I think the more people in the GNU of different parties there could be, the better in
Yes.
terms of democracy.
Yes.
So I wish that there were more parties from the minority parties
Yes.
that exist in order to sort of balance it out. Because those two parties are kind of like too big for their own britches.
Do you know what the sense is? I think last episode, you and I were talking about the metric results, and you actually touched upon the fact that people were saying, "Oh, Angie," instead of I can never get her name right. Is it Kharibe?
I don't even know the new one.
The DA, the Minister of Basic Education, the DA one, and so on. And there is a thought that says, perhaps this is good for us because there is this competition, because they know that they're bedfellows, but that they're not friends, right?
Right.
Although some people would argue that they actually want the same thing, really. Ultimately, the DA and the ANC doesn't matter.
Don't forget the
yeah.
DA is basically a child of the NP,
Yes.
which was collapsed by Thabo Mbeki with Gorsbrook.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So it kind of makes sense.
Well, the DA people would say to you, no, we are actually, from Helen Suzman. We are the We are the Progressive Federal Party,
PFP, right?
and the DP. And do you remember that?
I do.
Which at some point had 3 leaders, Malan and whatever. Okay,
Right.
doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, the reason I'm asking you these two questions, which is it working for them? I think it absolutely is working for them, right? But is it working for South Africa?
I think that remains to be seen, isn't it?
Remains to be seen.
It's a little too early to tell.
Yeah, we can't determine these things within 6 months, right?
No.
It's not possible. So then the question is, these people do not like, because they do not like each other, right? And so they are fighting. Some people are arguing that ultimately it's going to work for us because there is this pressure to say, who are the best performing ministers? Is it DA or is it ANC?
Right.
And therefore, that is likely to. I mean, it might be a simplistic argument, but it's there nonetheless. Yeah?
I will say this, that I think that in terms of checks and balances, it's good for each other because they're kind of looking at each other under a microscope. And each other's portfolios to say like, you're corrupt. So in that level, maybe we'll have a little less corruption. Although it's just so far gone at this point that I don't know how much we can save of what is left. But I think they don't trust each other, which I think is a good thing because they'll always be interrogating each other. So we find out more details about who may be doing some manga with who.
The thing about that also that's interesting, Kgomotso, is that South Africa is a weird country. I promise you, the people are now claiming after the fact, no one foresaw, number one, just the formation of Umkhonto weSizwe, no one thought they would actually ever get to anywhere near 15% of the vote. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's so unpredictable here. But my sense of it is, I don't think that in the next 2-3 general elections, there's going to be one party that gets 50% and becomes government.
Which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I
right?
like that. I like those
Yeah.
odds.
Yes.
And speaking of which, enough about the GNU. Let's talk about Julius for a minute.
No, but it's got everything to do with Julius. Everything we have been talking about has got everything to do with
Because
Julius.
he could be kingmaker.
Yeah? No, he could be, because the ANC could have gone the Julius route, right? And so forth. So now he hasn't really, he's lost a little bit of support from 2019.
Which I found very interesting.
Yes.
Because I did think they would do better.
Did you?
But I did. But people, are kind of tired with Julius's antics.
Yes.
You realize that when Mboiseni Ndlozi, for example, resigned from parliament, I was very surprised. People's reaction on Facebook was more like, oh, thank God. Now there'll be less antics in parliament.
Yes.
The average black person does not appreciate the disruptive nature of the EFF in parliament. I personally enjoyed it. Not particularly my kind of party, but I think some of those disruptions were valid and were needed. But there was a time also that you think like, now you're going a little too far.
No, but quite honestly, I mean, we're now talking historically. I mean, the 6th parliament and the 5th parliament, when the EFF was there, vastly, like there was a paradigm shift.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you were thinking, guys, can we cut these drinks because I want to go watch parliament?
Right.
When did that ever happen before the EFF come?
And it was very boring.
It was very, so, when we talk about people's participation in the democracy, not quite active citizenry, but at least it got people very engaged.
Yes, it did.
And I think that what the EFF did is it's exactly what forced us to be here at a GNU level. But the thing that even Julius and the EFF and everyone, because they do not like say, they'll say we're saying it's a one-man show. So the EFF, they just did not see the MK
but
party.
Isn't it a one-man show?
Well,
especially after the departure of those four.
Yes.
Mkhwebane, Mpofu, but the big one.
Floyd. Floyd.
Like we saw Julius visibly lose weight, like in a very short space of time. I've never seen him so heartbroken, like literally. It was like losing a lover.
It was like in the 1950s, if Oliver Tambo had decided to go join the PAC, or if Mandela had gone to join, it would have cut the movement at the knees. And
nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly didn't.
Well,
did you kind of?
Julius claims that he did. So this, because obviously he was privy to conversations that were happening behind.
I think maybe in the last
scenes.
couple of weeks, but before that, I don't think he ever saw that coming.
Yeah, I don't
because
think,
it was sort of like this brotherhood, almost like of blood. Like blood brothers. Although Floyd now claims, politicians, there's no permanent friends in politics.
Of course there aren't.
And all. He's like, no, it was always political. It's like, Floyd, umaka, no murata Julius.
No.
Umaka.
No, listen, you don't have to be a psychologist. You don't have to be a behavioral scientist to know that those two, what they shared together. Because people actually forget that when Floyd claims, because he's claimed this and said, the EFF he actually wrote the blueprint.
Right.
He is the one that came up with, let's almost militarize this, and commissars and chief commander-in-chief and so on. He's the one that said, no, we are, Leninist and Fanonists and so on and so forth. So he truly was right there. He was the fiber. He was part. He was the beating heart of the EFF. He was huge. And it's so sad when you see a leader like Julius, because unlike a lot of people, I actually do respect him, because I listen to when he says, so I don't care about everything else that goes around him, but he's an important politician, an important figure, and he makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to him saying that it's not a regrettable loss, let them go, I think he's being disingenuous.
But the way that he's been treating Mbuyiseni Ndlozi
Yeah.
has been shocking. Like for me, I was just kind of like,
I think it's PTSD.
Mbuyiseni, why are you still there? But Mbuyiseni is an amazing and brilliant tactician as
Yes.
well. So I'm interested in his long-term plan
Yes.
of what, and he's not going to jump into the MK necessarily, right? And clearly he hasn't. So I'm interested to see what his long-term plan is, considering he wasn't there in December at the, what is it, the elective conference?
Yeah.
No appearance at all. And Julius
At
made
the
it seem
NPA,
as if
it's called the
the
NPA.
NPA,
Yes,
as
yeah.
if it was just kind of like the most normal thing in the world. I thought that's why I thought like you're being disingenuous now.
So what's interesting is that you are, in terms of your speculation, because we are speculating, right, about where Mbuyiseni could be going, is that
If he's going anywhere.
and because the first party that came to your lips was MK party, but word around on the streets, Mr. Fiavokoi has been very speaking. Like
Right.
neither confirming nor denying the fact that they are in talk with Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi would be a fascinating thing.
It would be
Should he
interesting.
actually go the route of Lutuli House? Because it'd be interesting, where does he go? But also all these ructions, because people speculate and they say, all these reconfigurations, do they include Mbuyiseni somewhere? People speculate about everything. That's
Right.
particularly on social media.
Completely. And
yeah.
even we're speculating. But it's just curious because he's kept his cards very close to his heart.
Yes.
Yeah?
yes.
It's impossible to know what the hell is going on. But I've been keenly aware of the disses, the pokaring that
Yes.
Julius has unhurled on him. Where it's actually embarrassing. You'd be like, Julius, really?
Do you remember in our previous lifetime when we were at KFM with the original Uncaptured, that we once did actually interview the CIC, Julius, and do you remember who he came with?
With Mbuyiseni?
With Mbuyiseni. What did you remember on that particular, what did you make of their body languages and just like how they moved with each other? Because there's always this tag of Ice Boy. Did you get any whiff of that at all at that time?
Well, Mbuyiseni was clearly there to support Julius.
Yes.
That's what I read from it.
Yeah.
And he always made it a point to be like, this is the leader of the EFF. I'm just one of the soldiers. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it never really surprised me.
Because we did
too.
ask him the succession question.
We did.
With a warning.
And that's why I'm
Yeah,
saying
I
Julius is
remember.
disingenuous by saying, so what? He wasn't at the NPA. So what? He's not that important. Asking as if Mbuyiseni wasn't important. Mbuyiseni was there. Wherever Floyd wasn't, Mbuyiseni was there. So don't pretend as if Mbuyiseni meant nothing to you. And I think he knows exactly how dangerous Dr. Ndlozi could be.
This is one of those things that on this podcast we call things that make you go,
Shall we wrap that up?
Yeah.
On that note, we'll see you next week for another fantastic episode of Still Uncaptured.